So this is the first Sunday of Advent. It's the beginning of a new liturgical year for us, a year when we will primarily focus on the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel readings. And it is a beautiful time in the life of the church. And so I just want to take a couple minutes to speak to the importance of this season and perhaps some opportunities that we have to deepen in our life in Christ in this particular season. So Advent is an important time, and I was reading a commentary on it that I found incredibly powerful. One, because she was using the metaphor of threshold, which if you know who I am and what I'm doing now and developing the threshold center across the street, it had a particular significance for me. And this person was writing about thresholds and that Advent is a threshold as we move from the season of ordinary time into this season of watching and waiting and keeping alert. And one thing that she wrote in her reflection was that if you could think about it, like if you were walking into a home at the threshold, she said, on one side, you're moving from the exterior world and even maybe what we might call the profane. And then when we reach the threshold, and sometimes we kind of mark this passing into something more interior, more sacred, possibly coming into home, possibly. When I lived in Japan, and I've mentioned this in different settings before, we would always take our shoes off, just as if you were entering a temple, so that you weren't bringing the dirt from outside into the home. It was a marking of going over a threshold. And there's a little entryway in most Japanese homes and apartments called a genkan. And there were little cubbies, and you would take your shoes off and tuck them into this little cubby and then put some clean slippers on as you entered into the sanctity of your home. And so, how could that be a metaphor for our experience of Advent? Advent is a time of watching and waiting, which is counter to what our culture would have us do at this time. You know, now it can be a feeling from even before Thanksgiving anymore, this cranking up, right, towards the end of the year as we approach Christmas and all that is going on. But I'm here to encourage you tonight to, even if the world is very busy and spinning in your life right now, to give yourself the gift of crossing over the threshold from that busyness into the depth of the sacred home that God calls you to, each and every one of us. And that happens as we take time to pause. You'll notice whether it's year A, B, or C in the lectionary, whether it's Luke, Mark, or Matthew, that the first Sunday of Advent always has some kind of apocalyptic reading in there, like today that we see. Get ready, be awake, be aware, be alert. And this preparation that we're moving into is one to invite the Christ child into our lives, but also a preparation for Christ's second coming into the world. And so as we prepare for that, perhaps we could think about this is also a time of purification. What is it in our lives that we might want to, using the metaphor of the threshold of walking through the house and taking off our shoes, what might God be inviting you to, inviting me to let go of and leave at the door so that we can enter the sanctuary with God, of home with God? Is it perhaps a sense of busyness that gives us a feeling of false importance? Is it a sense of materialism that we think that will help us find happiness and joy? Is it anger and frustration that needs addressing in some powerful way? whatever it is that you might be feeling at this moment that God is inviting you to let go of, so that you can live awake and aware for the coming of the beauty of Christ in your life. And some of this might almost take a place of a clearing out. Does that, like a sense of clearing out? And I was thinking, clearing out so we can be a manger for Christ to reside in our heart, in our lives, in a deeper way. And there are a lot of ways we could do this at any time, and particularly at Advent. So I have an encouragement for you to perhaps once a day, maybe in the morning, create a beautiful little space. It could be a chair and a candle, and just light that candle and spend 5 minutes or more in that space, open to Christ in silence. Or it could be reading and the Advent devotional book that's put together by Living Compass, and just sit and receive and wonder, where, God, are you inviting me to enter into a deeper sense of relationship and communion with you? This is a beautiful season for so many different ways. And my hope is that we won't lose the actual most important meaning of this season, which is to keep alert and to be awake and aware for where Christ is coming to you in your life. And in the Advent of this first Sunday, in the spirit of this first Sunday of Advent, what I'm going to have us do now, when we normally would have 2 minutes of silence, we will actually have 5 minutes of silence. For some of us, we'll be like, woohoo, 5 minutes of silence, and love it. Others of us will wonder, when is she going to ding that bell? It's okay, wherever you are. But in this time of silence, I would encourage you to just rest and wonder with God about where God is inviting you to leave something at the doorway for this Advent season, in the hopes of growing closer to Christ and one another.